The National Center for Child Protection has revealed that more high school learners are attempting to take their own lives. According to the organization, an average of 10 children commit suicide a day, with some being as young as 6 years old. Today is World Suicide Prevention Day, a day that provides us with an opportunity to rekindle our efforts to promote positive mental health and amplify our voices to prevent suicide, which remains a major public health problem worldwide. The World Health Organization estimates that there were over 700,000 deaths from suicide in the world in 2019. So to discuss the prevalence of suicide, we're going to be joined by Dr. Keitumetse Mashego, Clinical and Sports Psychologist. So very good afternoon to you, Dr. Mashego. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to your listeners, and thank you for having me.
Information about and helps to create awareness, perhaps also empower us. I wonder, given the stark realities and just looking at some of the statistics I've highlighted now, how do we begin to tackle the stigma associated in the wake of this global health emergency?
You know, sadly, with mental health and mental health illness, it becomes about campaigns. Then when there's a crisis, there's intervention regarding a crisis, and then it dies out. So I think we really need to start being consistently, raising awareness about mental health, its impact, and also just working on the stigma, not when there's a crisis or not when statistics show that there's a rise in, for example, suicide or other mental health illnesses. So I think our prevention systems need to really do the work, because we're really failing in terms of how we are trying to prevent it. We find it at the tail end when, it's already sometimes leading to suicide attempts or suicide completion.
Well, so preventative measures is key. And so at this point, how do we begin to strengthen our healthcare system to accommodate that, given our socioeconomic conditions, which are obviously also contributing factors to what's being reflected in some of the statistics?
Sadly, not just in South Africa, but in society generally, we focus on the outward appearance and also the physical. So we really need to be robust in terms of how we promote that, how powerful the mind is. With the mind, it really determines your actions, reactions, behavior, and even how you think about things. And unfortunately, in our society, a lot of us are carrying a lot of traumas that we haven't dealt with. And obviously that we can also pass on to our children. And therefore, we really need to look at how to make people comfortable with going to do check-ins with clinical psychologists and, mental health professionals before it's too late. I think we really need to strengthen and encourage people and really work on the stigma, because, with suicide, it's not just about depression. It can be a sometimes spontaneous reaction to, for example, a failure or, a breakup, a relationship breakup, or a trauma. So we need to understand that it's not that this person was actually depressed. It could have been that there are other external factors that you've mentioned that led to this. And of course, the personality always plays a role when it comes to this, and just their ability to tolerate stress. You can imagine if someone has been stressed, all their life. It's going to be difficult if, they fail, for example, and that's added stress to what is already existing. So we really need to, encourage people to seek help, just for a check-in before there's a crisis, and at all ages. As we can see, it impacts even the young ones, because sometimes they feel like they have no one to talk to and they feel overwhelmed. So we really need to start young with these preventative measures.
Thank you for those sentiments, because South Africa is a society or a nation that was founded on violence. So there's a lot of PTSD. I'm looking at what transpired during COVID-19 and the impact that has had, perhaps now that we're living in the wake or the ripple effects of COVID-19. And, I think I'm trying to understand what support then is on offer, because conditions and factors were exacerbated. And I know that there was an issue with a skills deficit and, some of the measures and understandings regarding that. What have you observed, perhaps just over the past few years, in relation to some of the concerns with regards to the support on offer?
People are always of view that seeking therapy is costly and not worth it. And I always say that that is an investment you need to make, but also that there are free services available in the public sector. And of course, unfortunately, there's more people to serve in the public sector than the clinicians available. But also what's important is to ensure that you actually seek help from the correct professionals, because out there's many people who call themselves all sorts of things like therapists, counselors, but they're not trained to deal with things like clinical depression. So the only person, for example, who's trained to deal with clinical depression is a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist and several other professionals. So I think we also need to educate about where to seek help, but also the professionals that are out there. We need to also not, be adjust in terms of how we serve our clientele, because I think sometimes because of financial constraints, people take on clients that they don't know what to do with them. And then what then happens is the clients then don't want to go back because they didn't get the service of a trained professional. So I think we also need to be aware that professionals need to be registered with the Health Profession Council, and there's also a scope of practice for people to practice in. So me as a clinical psychologist, I can admit, for example, with a psychiatrist in a hospital, but other professionals are not trained to do that, to admit in that way. So we need to just be aware, and there are other multidisciplinary professionals, of course, who work in the mental health sector that we need to make aware, such as the occupational therapist, the physiotherapist, because we need holistic care when it comes to mental health.
These are, no, absolutely. These
and also
are all,
just for
these are all valid points that you're raising. I want to also then look at the digital era that we find ourselves in during this fourth industrial revolution, what the impact that is having, the role of social media, the concerns there, just with perhaps even dispelling some of the misinformation, disinformation pervading those spaces.
With social media, I always say to people, it's not real. It's not reality. You can have people who are severely depressed posting happy videos of themselves there. And you also, as I said, there is no control there. So you get people, as I say, who claim to do things or who claim to assist people with severe psychopathology, who end up actually, making the situation worse for the people who could have benefited from proper professional intervention. So social media definitely causes a lot of pressure for especially everyone, not just the youth, but I think everyone is impacted. So we also need to be aware that people posting on social media, that's not reality, right? And sometimes when this happens, people often feel like they're lacking. Some people are posting families, and if you don't have a family, you feel like, sure, I lack, I'm different. So also we need that self-awareness, so that if you have issues regarding where you come from, your childhood, your traumas, your past relationship, that you ensure that you seek the help. Because with psychological problems, we need to take responsibility for our healing. That's the tricky part about it, that you need to actually make the decision that I'm unwell, I need help, where do I seek the help, and actually do the work. And daily you need to show up. Because remember, you've been in a dark space for so long that it's become a part of you. So undoing it will require effort, but it is possible, right? With the right professional help. And sometimes we might need to, get you on medication, but also that it's okay, that it's because there's brain chemistry involved that has been impacted by stresses, or sometimes is predisposition for certain things like depression, psychosis, etc., and bipolar disorder.
Dr. Keitumetse Mashego, thank you for your time with us on the SABC.